How's it going, folks? Today we're going to talk about Joe Montferrand, also known as Big Joe Montferrand, which is the pronunciation I'm more familiar with, and probably most of you are familiar with, so that's probably the one I'll stick with if it's okay with you folks. As they say, there's all kinds of tall tales about Big Joe, but we're going to talk about the man that actually the legend's based off of today. So he was a French-Canadian, born in 1802. He was born into a sort of a rough and tough family. His grandfather was a soldier, and they settled in New France there, aka Montreal. In the town he grew up in, there was something like 10 boxing halls, and all the taverns there really respected fighting and brawling and all that. So this is the environment the fella grew up in. But at any rate, him, like many others in his town there, at a very young age was drawn in by the tales of the voyeurs coming in and spending all their money in town and having a great time. So at the age of 21, he signed on with the Hudson Bay Company. So he stayed there for a good 4 years, and then he started working for a fella named Joseph Moore in 1827. Moore was actually an employee of a fellow named Baxter Bowman, who owned a bunch of logging camps that was in the northern Ottawa River area. So this allowed for Joseph to live the logger's life for a good 30 years. During this time, he would work for the summer, fall, and winter months, traveling along there, doing all the taverns and cutting down timber, working up a sweat. And then in the springtime, then they would shunt all the logs down the river and become rivermen for the time. And then they'd get back to logging and so on and so forth. So back in the 1800s, when men would only grow up to be like at most 5 foot tall, Joe was seen on record to be up to as 6'4", which even today is a fairly large fella. And back then he was huge. So naturally, growing up in a rough and tumble town and being a tough logger fella, going from these taverns, he ended up becoming known for his fighting skills and his size. So a lot of people would challenge him, and he would wind up in a lot of scraps. In fact, he actually winded up in quite a few professional boxing matches. So a lot of the big names of the time challenged him and took him on and lost. I can't remember the name of the fella exactly. I'll be putting an information blib in the description below, and you guys can check out one of the places where I get some of this from. Anyways, the one fella, he knocked out first punch and won the round there by KO. So after winning various boxing matches and bar brawls, there got to be more groups of men that he ended up having to fight, and a few times where he had to fight defending his logging operations and all whatnot from gangs and whatnot. The biggest fight that I know of that he fought of, which is the biggest fight that I don't know that I've ever heard of anybody ever doing, is that he fought off a band of men 150 strong. This was a gang back in the time. I believe they were called Shiners, that were outraged over an election at the time. And however it broke out, apparently Joe led off the fight by taking the first man who led the charge off, who was a rather smaller fella, by his two bottom feet. Well, I guess he decked him first, knocked him down, took him by his two bottom feet, and then led the fight off by swinging him by his feet at his opponents. I don't care who you are, that's impressive. There's even a few monuments on Big Joe, big wooden statues that have been carved about him. One I believe is in Ottawa, and you can go and check them out to this day. They're still standing. Then at the age of 55 in 1857, he decided to take her easy and he retired to a place in Montreal. So even then, with his body completely failing on him and him developing a hunch and him just being completely sore all the time, he was still known as the king of the Ottawa River. He was still a strong man and a legend while he was still alive. The stories already had begun about Big Joe at that point. But unfortunately on October 4th, 1864, Big Joe passed away. Just at his home. That's all that I can really find about it. I assume that he just passed away from old age and from his body taking such a beating. Big Joe lived one heck of a legendary life. There's lots of tall tales about him, as they say, and you can see lots of them on the internet today. Easy to find and look up. The folklore goes very, very deep with Big Joe. He's almost like a Paul Bunyan. Even names such as Stompin' Tom has written songs about Big Joe, and I encourage you to go check out some of his lore and see some of the fun stories about him. I can't do any justice really about trying to tell you everything about the fella. I just kind of get his name out there and get you onto the bug. But Big Joe, he was a legend, and I believe he deserves the title of legendary logger. Till next time, take her easy. Be safe.